All right. Let's give it a few moments. Give it a few moments. Let's get some people in here. See lots of people joining already. See lots of people joining. That's great. I'll give it a minute or two. Let the people file in. Yeah, it's not even 10:15 yet. We'll give it a second. All right, all right. Let's get everybody in here. Let me make sure I got all my stuff in order. Let me move this over to. We'll do that. All right. I can see me all right. Yep. Okay. I got the spreadsheet pulled up. All right. We're going to give it another minute. Give it one more minute, see who joins. All right. Here we go. Hold on. Let me. One second. One second. All right. Let's see what we got here. All right. I got the chat pulled up as well. All right. I got everything that I need. Let's see. I got the Excel sheet pulled up. We will get to that in a second. All right. Here we are, Friends Who Ramble. We are coming back for another episode. We got a one-on-one with the commissioner. Very excited for that. I know he's got a lot to say. There have been a lot of questions that have been thrown his way, so I thought it was best to have him on. We could talk a little bit more about that stuff. He'll give his statement. He'll pass it back to me. We're going to look at the playoff picture. We're going to look at the draft lottery. We're going to see how things look heading into this final week of the season. And then also the chat will be open. It's open right now. We'll be accepting any questions in the chat from the commissioner. So anything that you guys need, maybe I recommend listening to what he has to say first and then determining if you still need to ask that question after, or you could just ask the question now and maybe he answers it in his statement, or maybe it's something that he looks to find an answer for, in that time. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass it to the commissioner, and we are going to get this started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. With the final week of the season approaching, I felt it was necessary for me to get in front of the people and provide clarity on some topics that have suddenly become very pertinent. So, over the course of the season, I've been asked a handful of times about our tiebreaking procedure. In those instances, the context was always that of a tie between two teams. So, I've answered as such using verbiage a little more loosely than I would in scenarios involving three or more teams. The fact of the matter is, a tiebreaker between two teams is much simpler than a tie between three or more, and essentially goes without saying. But now we are facing a potential four-team tie in the Gay Sun Conference that is a little more complex and requires more nuance when discussing it. And that is exactly why I'm joining the show today, to dive a little bit deeper into that. So to start with a two-team tie, in the event of a tie between two teams with the same record, that tiebreaker is head-to-head record. If the involved teams split their season series at 1-1 apiece, we would then defer to points scored in those matchups. But the team with the higher point total would win the tiebreaker. Simple enough. In the past, I've used words such as, but not limited to, head-to-head record, head-to-head points, somewhat interchangeably as a blanket term, if you will. In a two-team tie scenario, both record and points are effectively the same thing. So that's why I've been a little bit looser with that usage. If a team goes 1-0 against a team, 2-0 against that opponent, they've obviously scored more points. If they split the games 1-1, the points scored in those matchups are the tiebreaker. So in sum, whoever scored the most points in their one or two matchups is the winner. I hope that provides some clarity on why I've used some of the verbiage that I have. But when more teams start to get involved in the tie, that's where it requires a little more nuance. Becomes a lot more complicated to sort through. It's not as simple as this team beat this team beat that one, but that team beat this other team. It's tough to work through. You could try and make a matrix of everyone's head-to-head record, but that becomes a little convoluted. So instead, what we're doing is we take the records of each team against the other teams involved. In other words, all the tied teams, their records against each other. The teams with the best records in those games would be deemed the winner. Basically, if you beat the teams that you're tied with, if you would have those head-to-head tiebreakers, that's going to work out in your favor. The teams with the best records in those games would be deemed the winner. In the instance of tied records amongst each other, the teams who scored the most points in these games would win. If that fails to break the ties, we would then run the same procedure, but with conference records and then points. If after that we still don't have a winner, the total points for is the deciding factor. I will pass that back to my host in just a second. He has a spreadsheet made up showing for the Gay Sun Conference how things are looking heading into the final week. I think that'll provide a little bit more clarity if my explanation did not. As commissioner, this is my interpretation of the NFL tiebreaking procedures. I've said in the past that I lean on the NFL rulings for certain decisions with undefined bylaws in our league. To peel back the curtain, simply put, when I pushed for this new format, the two conferences, everything like that, two-team tiebreakers, that seemed easy enough. That was a very easy rule to define. 3+ teams, that was not really a scenario that we had run through as a league. I don't think anybody really asked about it. I never went out of my way to provide any sort of definition for that. So I'm doing that now. I believe it remains consistent with what I've said. So I will get back to my statement. I understand that there might be times where my explanations don't accurately reflect what I'm saying, but I've never been asked publicly about these tiebreakers regarding 3 or more teams, and I reserve the right to waive any prior interpretations of my words that might be deemed hypocritical. I'm an adult with a life who is doing his best to run this league. I have always done best by the league, often putting the league's interests above my own team's. Under this new format, we are looking at drama we have never before seen. This is a far and away the most exciting Week 14 in league history, with tons of parity and more teams in the hunt than ever. Objectively, I deem this new format a success. I understand that not all might agree with that statement. If you are truly opposed to these rules, I'm open to having a conversation. My only request is that you check with your biases and make sure that those are not clouding your feelings. This is a standard tie-breaking procedure that I am interpreting directly from the NFL rulebook. This is often how ties are broken in any sort of league with standings. Just because it might not work in your favor of your team this year does not mean it is unfair. I stand by my decision, but I'm also willing to wear it if it flops. If you feel so strongly opposed, I beg you to speak up in the offseason and lead the charge on a rule change that we can vote on as a league. But right now, these are uncharted waters that nobody saw coming, and I am doing my best to navigate it with integrity. Thank you for your time. I will now pass it to our host, who will run through the Gay Sun scenarios, as well as the current playoff and draft lottery picture. While he is doing that, please use that time to submit any questions for me in the chat. All right, let me share my screen really quick. Hold on, let me see. I'll keep the audio on. So this is the Gay Sun tiebreaker scenario right here. This is where we stand heading into Week 14. All right. Right now we got Lamar and the Zits. They are 8-5. They are the leader in the conference with 8 wins. The Cucks, the Bussy Boys, the Slow Stroke Kings, they all have 7 wins. So right now there is that tiebreaker scenario right there between the Cucks, the Bussy Boys, and the Slow Stroke Kings. I have a head-to-head matchup with Lamar and the Zits this week. The Cucks, they play Frank's team. The Bussy Boys, they play Amaral's team. But that head-to-head matchup between me and the Zits, that's going to provide a lot of clarity for this playoff picture. So right now what we're looking at is if we move into the head-to-head, assuming that, right, because the only way that the scenario plays out is if I do win this week against the Zits. So let's assume that I beat the Zits. Let's also assume that the Cucks and the Bussy Boys win their matchups that they are favorited in right now. That would put us all at 8 wins, right? That would then move us over to the head-to-head category. Right now, the Zits have 3 wins. The Cucks, the Bussy Boys, and the Slow Stroke Kings all have 2 wins. These are in our games against each other. This is when all 4 of these teams have played. These are our records in this matchup. In this scenario, we are assuming that I win against the Zits. That way we can play this out. That would give me 3 head-to-head wins. That would suddenly bump me above the Bussy Boys, above the Cucks, correct? That would move me up, and that would mean that Lamar and the Zits and the Slow Stroke Kings are the top 2 seeds in the conference. Now, what would determine the 1 seed in the conference and who gets the bye, it comes down to if I outscore Bowen in these games. So if I beat Bowen by, I'm just doing some quick math, but I'm thinking I'm looking at about 47 points. Is that right? Yeah, if I beat him by about 47 points, a little bit less on the decimal there, so 46 and change, and I overtake him in this head-to-head points for category, I would then have the 1 seed, and I would get a first round bye in the first round of the playoffs. Now, if the Bussy Boys or the Cucks end up losing one of these games, or one of either of their games this upcoming week, that changes things as well because that would take them out of the picture, assuming that I win. But if this doesn't work out, and if somehow we weren't able to find a tiebreaker here, which in this scenario where I do beat the Zits, that wouldn't be an issue. We would then move over to the conference. Here are the conference wins here. Of course, you can see 5-4-4-4. If Bowen were to lose to me next week, that would bump me up here. But that would also bump them up there. And then we would look at the points for here. But that's only if we couldn't find a tiebreaker from this column. We are looking for 2 teams to come out of it here. Now, if I lose, the Bussy Boys and the Cucks both win, then this would just be the deal for these 3 teams. Of course, if any of them lose, that just changes everything. So I'm open if people have questions, if they want to look at this and they want to run through scenarios with me. I'm open to have that discussion. We could talk about if this team loses, if this team wins, if this team wins. Right now, I'm just kind of looking at what I'm considering the doomsday scenario, which is me, the Cucks, and the Bussy Boys all win. That puts all of us at 8 wins, and then we would have to go to this head-to-head category and figure it out. But there are, of course, other scenarios that we could look at that could keep me on here for an extra hour, so I'm not going to do so. Moving on to the playoff picture. As it stands, and I should say right now, because of this, right, you see here, we all have 7 wins. The Cucks are over the Bussy Boys for that 2 seed. Now, in the current playoff picture, working off of what we have now, this is if the playoffs were to start this week. This is what we'd be looking at. Slippery Pete, Lamar, and the Zits. Those are the 1 seeds from both conferences. They would have the first round byes. Then we would work it out, and we would see the Cucks. They get the 2 seed or the 2 seed in their conference. The Suns get the 2 seed in their conference. They get here. This is determined by points for now. Right? The seeding within your tranches that you're in, that's decided by points for. And then the wild card teams, which are the remaining teams with the most points for, that would be the Bussy Boys. That would be Chris Carson Wentz. So I will say the Bussy Boys right now, they're kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of getting that 1 seed, that first round bye, but they're pretty safe in terms of making the playoffs, barring a total points for collapse. As you can see, they are 41 points ahead of Chris Carson Wentz. McMorris' team also has a ton of key players on a bye this week, but he is also a little under 70 points ahead of, 66 points of I Love My Mom. So it would require quite a collapse or a historic performance from either of these teams to kind of get Simcoe out of the playoff picture. So whether he's the 1 seed, the 2 seed, or not, I'd say that he's pretty safe. I think my team is the most volatile right now because as it stands, I am the 4th seed. I am the 4th team in the draft lottery. I don't own my pick. But if I blow Bowen out next week, I could be looking at a first round bye in the playoffs. The 6 remaining teams, the only team that really has any shot of making the playoffs or getting that wild card spot based on points for is Wallace's team, who is 25 points behind McMorris' team. I've not looked at who Wallace has available this week, but based on the bye weeks that McMorrow's dealing with, I'd say that that's a solid possibility for him to make it right there. Um, Moving on to the draft lottery, this is what we're looking at. The two teams on the outside looking in, if that's how you want to look at it for the draft lottery. Right now, I love my mom with a pick owned by Chris Carson Wentz. Um, they're not going to move. They're not going to get into the lottery. Wallace has no shot at getting into the lottery. So McMorrow, if this pick does stay outside of the playoff picture, whether it's him, whether it's his own team, McMorrow has both picks. McMorrow is going to be looking at this sixth pick. Next up is Schvoyadel, who I think that they have aspirations of making it into the lottery. Right now, they are 8 max points for outside. We'll see how that goes. I mean, that's not something that you can really plan for. I guess, if he wants to just like drop his bench and start shit players, he could make it happen if he really wanted to. Otherwise, it's luck of the draw, which is why we put this max point for rule in. But 8 points, I'm playing to win. My team's been hot. I'm 5-1 down the stretch, a chance to finish the season on a 6-1 run. So he could catch me. He could sneak in. It would behoove him to do so because he owns his pick. I don't own mine, so I have no obligation to try and stay there. But the lottery, as it is now, it would be the Slow Stroke Kings, owned by Slippery Pete. 2 pins, Tasaki No, and with a small lead in max points for Go Tigers, owned by Chris Carson Wentz. McMorrow could add to his embarrassment of riches with the first overall pick and the 6th overall pick, as well as like 3 more picks from the playoff teams. So he's looking at quite a draft class once again. Maybe not as impressive as last year, just in terms of volume of picks, but nonetheless, 4, 5, 6 picks in the first round is nothing to sneeze at. All right, let's check the chat. Let me just see. Hold on. Let me pull the chat up real quick. Let me see. What are people asking? I'm looking at it now. Great call by the commish to realign the league. Plenty of drama. Thank you very much for that comment. I agree. Like I said in my statement, this is by far the most interesting Week 14 that we've ever had. And if you've been following along, the last couple of weeks have also been insane. I'm seeing another comment, just kind of calling it unfair. I don't think it is. There's ways to look at it where you can kind of justify or knock any team's resume, right? If I fall short, if I go 6-2 down the stretch and I fall short, if I go 7-1 and somehow get screwed, it is one of those things that I want to kind of let it play out because I don't know, maybe I'm missing a scenario of something that happens. Let me stop sharing my screen. Maybe I'm missing like a scenario where this happens, that happens, and my team doesn't get in or another team doesn't, right? For example, I'm pretty sure the Zits are a lock for a top 2 seed in the conference, even with a loss. But don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. I have to see it play out. I'm not totally sure. I think I've covered all the bases, but you just never know. So don't quote me on that. But I think the Zits are locked into one of those top 2 spots, and it really just comes down to if I win, how much I win by would determine if he's the 1 seed or the 2 seed. But you can knock anybody's team. If I go on this run 6-2, 7-1, and it's still not enough, then you can just say, well, hey, you lost your first 3 games of the year. You didn't really score enough points in some of these matchups. You didn't score enough early on. You should have been better to start the year, and you wouldn't have been in this. There were times I can point to just for my team personally. It's purely anecdotal, but if I started this player, if I started that player, I could have won a matchup. And now I'm looking and thinking, wow, well, that one win could have been huge because it could have avoided this whole situation, right? Or if you think it's unfair for the Zits that they've been on top of the division all year and suddenly they could be the 2 seed or something. Well, look at their record down the stretch. They've alternated wins. It's the same thing. You should have just turned one of those losses into a win. It happens. And the same thing with Simcoe. If Simcoe's team ends up getting screwed in this, which, like I said, I think he's on the outside looking in terms of getting the 1 seed, the first round bye, but I think he's very much safe in terms of just making the playoffs, which I think that's what's most important here. But the guy's team has scored less than 80 points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. So it's things like that, right? He lost head-to-head matchups. He lost to me. He lost to the Cucks. Those are things that would have helped him in the tiebreaker. Any team has reasons. They have pros, they have cons. They have things that you can knock, they have things that you can use to elevate their case. Um, I just think that anyone's going to look at it from a biased view if the bias exists. So, like I said in my statement, the teams that lose, they're going to be pissed off. The teams that benefit from it, they're going to love the rule change. But I think in reality, this is a very fair ruling. We can always open it up to vote if people hate it that much. And if people do, I'm going to stand here as commissioner. I'm going to be willing to eat it. I think it's a fair rule. I think it's how a lot of standings, especially if you want wins to matter, which was the point of this vote. This is why we voted to change the format, both to two conferences, but then also the playoff structure and how we determine that. We said it all offseason. We wanted wins to matter again. In years past, people would be totally fine with losing if they scored enough points. And as commissioner, that made me sick. We are competitors here. If you only care about points scored, go play in a best ball league. That's what I got to say. If this really pisses you off, like I said in my statement, check your bias. Are you pissed off because you think this is like a disgrace? Or are you pissed off because you're realizing, hey, I thought my team was safe. Now it's not. And now I'm lashing out. Okay, because just because it doesn't benefit you now does not mean that the coin can't turn next year and it can suddenly work in your favor. That's all I'm saying. I ask you to try and look at this from an unbiased perspective and ask yourself, is the rule unfair or does it just not benefit me right now? That is all that I ask. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to cover regarding that rule. But I'm not sure. Yeah, at the end of the day, win your games every week. When you play somebody in the conference, you should try and beat them because if you don't, you're losing ground to them in the conference race. Records matter, head to head records matter, conference records matter. And if we have a tie from any of those things, that's when we have kind of the micro tiebreaker of the points for in the games that are being cited for the tiebreaker. I think that's all I've got. I stand by my decision. I've always done what's best for this league. I've always put this league first. I think I have pretty good instincts with this stuff too. So I just ask for a little bit of grace, maybe some trust. If you think that I'm here trying to pull something nefarious, trying to screw people over, I think that's a brutal mischaracterization of me. If you feel that strongly, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to change your mind. But if I was coming over the top with some insane rule that directly benefited me, made no sense, I get it. But this is not that. Okay, some people are asking, I see a question in the chat, why are we just making this decision now? It's not really a decision that's being made now. I don't think I'm necessarily making up a rule on the spot. I think I'm answering a question when asked. And that question has never really been asked before. We've never really covered what happens if it's a 3-team tie, if it's a 4-team tie. If two teams tied in their weekly matchup this week, what's the ruling there? We've never talked about that. We've never come up with a ruling for a individual week tie. If we were doing the draft lottery and two teams at the same max points for, how do we determine who gets the better lottery odds? I don't know, because we've never faced that scenario. We've never fleshed it out. We've never talked about the what if when it happens, if it happens. So I'm not sure. I believe this is a honest interpretation of the rule that I have applied to the 2-team tiebreakers. So now I'm simply answering a question that's asked. I'm fleshing it out, and I'm working my way through a pretty complex situation, essentially by myself. Thank you to Ryan Simcoe. He did help me a lot with just compiling some of the data in terms of the head-to-head matchups and things like that. But I mean, otherwise, I'm on an island here and I'm making a decision that is going to maybe make some people happy, piss others off. I'm not really sure how this is going to be received, but that's where we stand. I think right now it is on me as commissioner to just step up, provide that ruling. I don't think a vote can happen midseason because I don't think you can vote on a permanent rule change when bias is in play. So if people really hate it, as I said, I beg you to speak up in the offseason, propose a rule change, and we can vote on it. If people feel that strongly and they want to make a change, get out, lead the charge, and vote. That's what we can do. All right. Um, I think that kind of covers everything that I have right now. Good luck to everybody that's fighting for a playoff spot this week. Good luck to the others that are hoping they can improve their lottery standing. Next Tuesday is going to be the lottery drawing. Maybe the reveal the same night. If not, I would try and do that Wednesday. Um, Also, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would like to try and have Amaral and Frank on for a end of season power rankings, playoff predictions, and maybe not just end of season, but looking ahead power rankings as well. A little bit of a combined action there, but we'll figure that out. I just wanted to hop on here, address some of that stuff. If people badly need it in writing, I can provide that. I also just wanted to have it out here so I could speak freely, um, take my time, really think about what I want to say. And now you have video proof of everything I said. So if you want to hold something against me, try and do it. I touched on it briefly in my statement. I understand that, maybe at times if you dig deep enough in text, I don't know. Maybe my explanations weren't as clear as I ever intended for them to be. But I waive the right to reject any of that gotcha culture stuff because I'm just a guy. I'm a 30-year-old guy, got married this year. I'm trying to run this fantasy league of my own. Other people, they have families, they have kids. We're adults here. All right. It's a complex situation. I'm trying my best to navigate it. And I just ask for a little bit of grace. So if you want to be an asshole about it, you want to come at me, feel free, but that'll be between you and God if that's how you want to act. So thank you for everybody tuning in. I look forward to answering any questions that people have. You can text me directly if you want to keep it private. You can also bring it up in the league chat. But I think I covered everything to the best of my ability here, and I would like to operate off of this explanation moving forward. Thank you very much.